Good afternoon, sir.
Sorry, good afternoon. I was having problems with my computer, but it's okay now. Good afternoon. We'll start in a few minutes. Good afternoon again, everyone. Sige, let's just wait for the others. No? Okay, wait lang. I will prepare the deck. Uh, I hope all of you are doing well. Um, Module 2. Okay. Hmm. Sige, let me share my screen now. We'll start at 5:02. Share. Okay. You guys can see my screen, no?
Yes, sir. Apo.
Right. Sige. Let me know lang din ha, if I'm a bit choppy or what. No? Sige. Okay, I think it's 5:02. We can start, no? The others can follow. Sige. So again, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me this afternoon, no? During this week, no? So today, we'll start with module 2. But before that, no, a few announcements. I usually start my class with announcements. No? So for those of you who, just in case you don't know yet, no, module 2 is already up, no, and that would include instructions on your diet assignments, no, the pair assignments, no. So just in case it's due on March 5, no, at 11:59 p.m. No? So if you're because it's up to you, no, whoever you want to pair up with, no, but some of you might be having difficulty finding a partner. That's fine. That happens as well, no, because you might have a lot of friends, or you might be a fourth year student or a super senior, no. Maybe you don't know some of your classmates. So okay lang yan. So please answer the survey because after this week, no, those who can't find partners, no, I'll basically connect all of you together and then kayo nang bahala. All right. So this class is an even numbered class, no? So should be an exact number of pairs, 12 yata. Okay. So please be patient with Oski, us, and your partner majors, no, your econometrics classes. No, we're still trying to navigate the integration of our courses. So I think you'll be signing up with your NSTP classes soon. No, so we're trying to harmonize the lists. No, and thank you to those who've already emailed me about your unique situations, so whether you've taken NSTP, no, because I don't want you to take NSTP again, no, or econometrics again. So, sige. So please stay tuned, no. Matagal pa naman. So our group work will still be for module 4. So that's The due date will probably be in April, end of April or early May yun. So stay tuned for that. Please be patient with us. It's hard kasi to integrate and then you have people enrolling in different sections. So medyo, it's a bit overwhelming, no, for some of us. All right. Before module 2, no, I made a request last time. I asked you guys, no, if you can please make sure that you not just finish module 1, but also please watch the final video. No? Um, so before we discuss module 2, no, I just wanted to hear from you guys. No, what are your key takeaways? No? And I hope you keep this in mind. No? Your key takeaways, no, until the end of the course, and throughout your career, your life. No? These are life lessons, by the way. So, who for those of you, I hope majority of most of what would be your key takeaways? No? Maybe a few of you can let me know, no, of this video. No, it was a bit shocking. No? The title was a bit shocking. No? The poor don't deserve your pity. Parang, huy, bakit? So yeah. So any key takeaways? Just wanted to share. If you want to share, some of you or a few of you lang. Anyone? I'm sure some of you have watched it naman, no? Anyway. No brave souls. Still too early for class participation or overwhelmed with other subjects. Sige, kahit one or two lang. What was your key takeaway from this video at the end of module 1? Wala? No one has watched it? Or you've forgotten already? Arabella, go ahead.
Hi, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, I can hear you well. Yeah.
Okay. So when I watched the video, I think what I felt about it is that I think society has normalized um pitying the poor. And I agree with the TED Talk by Fred Branson that we shouldn't really focus on them being poor because their situation already is so um it's so demoralizing already for them, and they're already going through a lot of things. And to make these certain advertisements or commercials, I'm not saying that NGOs had bad intentions towards it, but highlighting that they're poor and they're going through tough conditions in life makes them feel even more bad about themselves. Instead, we should try focusing on ways to uplift them, because amidst everything that they're doing or everything they're experiencing, they should also find joy in the things they do. And I like how their organization highlighted on like how um, to find ways on how these kids can teach their audience, and also trying to promote their culture. I think that was a great way for them to make or to send their message to their audience, and it really made an impact, especially for like the people that listen to the TED Talk, and also for me personally. I prefer seeing those kinds of um, quote unquote advertising. I think that in that way it could really uplift both parties, for the people that need help and for the people that would want to help. You're mute po.
Sorry, I was muted. No, thank you for sharing, no, and I totally agree with you. No, it's better if there's a positive spin to it. No, and I got a private message here. No, the poor don't deserve pity because doing so limits them to their situation, and it reduces them to their situation. This is not true because they are more than their situation. Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, and thanks to both of you, no, for sharing. No. To the point, no, just to re-emphasize some of Arabella's points. No? the point is not to have pity, no. Not to not have pity, no. Kasi it's human nature naman, no? Of course, if you see someone, no, on the streets, for example, or a poor person, no, really having a hard time, you, of course, pity is, that's a knee-jerk reaction. That's automatic, no? But the point of the video is not so much like stop that from happening, no. No more empathy. No, it's trying to promote, it's trying to avoid, no, stopping there, no. Na yun na lang, awa ka na lang, no. Don't see them as helpless, no, because they have resources, they have assets and solutions, no. They themselves can identify, no, and they have their own ways of trying to help themselves, no. So let's avoid the problem here, kasi is once you see them as helpless, there becomes this power imbalance that you're better than them, no. Even subconsciously, no, whether you mean it or not, no, sometimes that creates that power imbalance, and you see yourself as better than them, which we want to avoid. And we want to avoid people thinking that they are the messiahs, no, the saviors. So the better paradigm, as Arabella had mentioned, no, and as the person who sent me a private message, I don't know if you didn't want your classmates to know who you were, but anyway, I won't mention your name. So it's really, how do you empower what they have, no? So it's a more positive spin because they are not totally helpless, no? And how do we develop solutions, no? And this is, I think, the important endpoint for module 1, which ties well with all of the things that we will be discussing throughout the course, no? How do we develop solutions that go beyond those apps? So this is a great cartoon, no? A lot of you might be familiar with the saying, and this is also a good introduction to module 2 because it doesn't stop with the second frame, no? There are 3 frames here, no? The first is, diba, I'm sure all of you know, some of you know, mga especially guys, no, and even senior high, pwede na babae, no, sa Ateneo. Some of you took tulong-dulong, no, in Ateneo High School, no, and after my JBP year, no, I was a relief teacher. I was actually a substitute while I was still trying to find a permanent job. I was a substitute teacher for tulong-dulong, for TD, no, sub for Meng Digia, no, si Ma'am Meng, no? So quite a legend in Ateneo High, no? So so yun, the first frame is all about the first and second frames are all about, if you want to feed a man, if you want, how is it again, sorry, mental block ako. If you feed a man a fish, no, he will, or a family, no, man or woman, or the family, if you give them fish, no, they will eat for a day. If you teach them how to fish, then they can feed themselves forever, no. It's more sustainable. But it doesn't stop there, no. When we're talking about development, there's a third thing, no. The solutions have to be appropriate. Kasi for example, if let's say it's a very stupid example, no? Parang, you're in Baguio, for example, you want to help the poor people in Baguio. You cannot teach them fishing, obviously, di ba? Kasi where's the sea in Baguio? No? So the point of this cartoon is you don't stop with trying a sustainable intervention. Make sure it is appropriate. So from module 2 onwards, now we are trying to and module 2 is all about, think of ourselves, no, as doctors, no. It's all about having different kinds of metrics, no, measurements, so that we can diagnose the issues properly, so that we can come up with more appropriate interventions. Kasi ganun yun eh. It's like a doctor, di ba? Your parents usually have their annual checkups, for example, no? The doctors order blood tests, urine tests, whatever, etc. So you have different metrics, no? Blood pressure, blood levels, blood sugar levels, creatinine levels, etc., etc. So you can see what interventions will fit potential problems. So this is a good ending, no? No, you develop solutions that go beyond dole outs, and you diagnose the issue properly so that eventually you can have appropriate solutions. So we are, module 2 is all about diagnosing it more specifically, more comprehensively, no? So that for modules 3 and up to 5, we can provide interventions. And your assignment, no, your diet assignment is all about diagnosing and providing interventions. So, yun. So that ends module 1. So I just wanted to provide that segue. All right. Module 2. We'll discuss module 2 this week and next week. No? So I presume that most of you have just started no, module 2. No? The first part of module 2 might just be a refresher for you guys. No? So I'll breeze through it because you've probably studied in your development economics classes. You've studied no, income poverty, definitely poverty incidence, etc. So I'll breeze through that. No? I'll spend time no, to make it worth your while. No? Value added nito as a supplement to development economics is we'll go through some of the more recent trends and some of the more technical metrics no, for poverty, no? For income poverty. We will discuss the non-income indicators of poverty and well-being next week. No? The CBMS, the APs, the HDI, HPI, MPI, etc. next week. Yeah. So we'll focus our discussion tonight, on the income part. So we'll have some technical discussions here, no? More technical measurements that you may probably not have covered no, in Dev Econ last sem. All right, so let's start no, with the very, very basic measurement of poverty, which is poverty incidence. Ito, I'll breeze through this. No? Correct me if I'm wrong, no? But I'm sure most of you, no, all of you should be familiar with this. No? Kundi, I doubt you passed development economics. No? So yun, poverty. No? So just to breeze through this, you have thresholds. No? You have two kinds of thresholds usually. No? So poverty line and then the subsistence line. So ito yung tinatawag na extreme poor. No? They don't have enough income. Remember, we're examining income-based measures. No? Income to meet the minimum nutrition. And then the higher threshold is the poverty line. So it's food plus your other basic needs. You can't satisfy that. So below this, below the poverty threshold, you are considered poor. If you are on the threshold, if your incomes are on the threshold or above, you are considered non-poor. And just to define it again for all of you, the terms poverty rate, incidence, head count, ratio, all of them are the same. They're all the same banana. So they're basically the proportion or the percentage of poor people to the total population. Could be individuals, no? The number of individuals like 100+ million Filipinos, or families, mga 20+ million families. Subsistence incidence matches with the subsistence line. No? Those who have incomes that fall below the subsistence or food threshold, they don't have incomes enough to sustain them in terms of nutrition. And the magnitude is, of course, the number, the actual number. Kasi itong rate, incidence, by its very title or name, no? they mean ratio or percentages. Magnitude is just the actual count. I'm breezing through this kasi you guys are familiar with this. So pre-pandemic, no, we were actually doing well. No, we were really doing well. No? Ito, for example, no? So ito. Especially 2015 all the way to 2018, no, we were really doing well. Poverty incidence among the population was really falling, no. So kita nyo naman, no, even this, no, subsistence incidence and poverty incidence fell. The problem is, sige, mamaya na, we'll cover the pandemic's effects. Before that, no, just quickly, no. And this is mathematical as well, but there's a reason why this is so. No? So which one is higher? No, poverty incidence among individuals or the population, or poverty incidence among families. And same question, which one is higher, you think? Subsistence incidence among people, no, counting all the people, or subsistence incidence among families or households? Which do you think is higher in general? Incidence among population or incidence among families? Anyone? You can type it in the chat box if you want, for example. Guess lang, guess. And there's a reason for it, actually. What do you guys think? Which one is higher? Poverty incidence among population? Ito. I think both population. Yes. And since you, sorry, I'll call you na lang, no? Or whoever would want. Someone said, no, if someone can verbalize this, someone said, I think both population. Yes, you are correct, no? But why? The question is why? Why do you think it is so? Lorenzo Barzaga, go ahead.
Sir, I'm not the one who sent the message,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I agree. I think it's if there are more, on average, more members in a family that's under the poverty threshold, then the poverty incidence would be higher in the population statistic.
Yes. Just to continue on your logic, no? Yes, both of you are correct, no? It's the incidence among population, whether it's poverty or subsistence, no, it tends to be higher, no, for the Philippines. No? This is not necessarily true for all countries, no. Developing countries most likely, no, because you can do the math. The lower income populations, the poorer ones, usually have larger family sizes. No? So, for example, instead of you counting, no, paano ba to? Oh, you're counting in this neighborhood, no, you've counted certain Filipinos. So sabihin na natin, no, one family, two families, no, one non-poor, one poor, no. If you count by individuals or by population, no, what will happen is, the non-poor has three or four members. The poor have 10 members. Exaggerate ko na to. So obviously, if you count them by families, the three people become one, and the 10-member family also is counted as one. No? It becomes hidden. No? The effect of the larger family sizes of the poor people becomes hidden. No? Because if it's roughly the same, no, the number of kids of the poor and the non-poor, no, it would probably end up the same. The incidence for population and for families. Kasi nga, the lower income populations have larger family sizes. All right, effects of the pandemic. No? So you have two statistics here, no? One among the population and one among families. No? Si Dr. Celia Reyes, and she came out with this in, I think I posted the link to the article. No? She came out with this last December, I think, or November, no? Just a few months ago. No? She did some of her own calculations, no? Based on official data sets. No? Because she was saying in 2015, no, they came out with a different, they tweaked the methodology a bit, no? And we'll go through the methodology later, no? The general methodology. But you know, whether you use the old series, meaning pertaining to the old methodology and compare it across years, no, or the new one, no, you would see, no, before the pandemic, no, again, just as I showed you earlier, no, ang ganda, no, poverty incidence was falling. Galing, no, especially, no, in the last, kasi remember the FIES, as you probably know, no, which is the data source for poverty incidence, subsistence incidence, and the inequality measures as well, no. The impressive, no, in the last two takes, no, from 2012 to 2018, no, poverty went down by almost 10 percentage points. That's big because remember, each percentage point for the Philippines, no, that translates to 1 million, at least, no, 1 million Filipinos. So if you reduce poverty by 10 percentage points, no, that's almost 10 million Filipinos that you're pulling out of poverty. So this is in terms of magnitude. You know, it's really good. No? New series and old series. Now, the problem is Dr. Celia's paper came out before. Dr. Celia Reyes used to be the past president. No? She just retired recently of the PIDS, no? Philippine Institute for Development Studies. The problem is what happened in 2021. Remember, the pandemic started. Now, we were really on track, no? Yung NEDA nga was basically saying, no, two things, no? We've already surpassed our targets. True naman sa PDP, no? Earlier than what we committed, what we targeted. And second, we were by 2020 yata 2021, we were supposed to have already been part of the upper middle income class. But the pandemic happened. So poverty, instead of continuing on its trajectory, went up. Now, mind you, they tweak nga the methodology. No? Kasi before, they measure poverty incidence every 3 years lang. No? The survey kasi is done every 3 years. Surveys are expensive. That's why sometimes they can't do it on an annual basis. Come 2015, I think, no? That's why there's the old series and new series. No? They decided, kasi dati, they only took the survey once. They visited whoever got randomly selected kasi I think the sample size is like 40,000 plus. Before kasi, they only went to your house once that year. Now, no, starting 2015, if you're selected for the FIES, the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, they go to your house, they ask you the same questionnaire. They go through the same questionnaire with you twice. No? One, to take into account the first semester, January to June. And then again, they come back around December, no? or January the following year to take into account your income and expenditure for July to December. So that's why they're saying because of that, no, that's why there are two series. No? Dr. Reyes uses two series kasi magkaiba eh. There are some distortive effects, no? Distortion effects. No? So we're only talking about the first semester. No? There's a lag, no, when they do the survey and when the results are computed. No? So they just released, no, just in December again, no, data for the first half, no, H1. No? We denote that by H1. Data for the first half comparing first semester of 2021 and 2018. Because of the pandemic, poverty incidence went up by 2, and this is among population, no, went up by 2.6 percentage points. So roughly 2.6 million Filipinos or 3 million Filipinos plunged into poverty as a result, largely as a result of the pandemic. And same with subsistence, a bit smaller, no, in terms of increases, it also went up, reversing our nice, no, really looking nice trajectory. Sayang. And same with families. No, sorry, I only have this chart for the population. So both incidence and magnitude were falling, no, among the population and among families. So, sayang talaga because of the pandemic. Just let me know if you have questions. I'm breezing through this kasi nga I know you guys are familiar with poverty incidence. So just wanted for your additional information, and this is on Canvas as well. No? They also come out with regional, no, and selected provincial statistics. No? So similarly, as a result of the pandemic, no, most regions saw increases, no, in poverty levels. No? With the Ilocos region, no, experiencing almost a doubling. No? Tingnan nyo to. Almost a doubling, no, of poverty incidence. No? Only CAR and the Davao region, no, region 11, no, had declines that were statistically significant. No? By the way, no, if you see here a region that doesn't have an asterisk, it means, no, and you guys are studying, you took statistics already, no, you're taking econometrics, no. based on statistical significance, no, the changes are not statistically significant. So itong 3.3 quote unquote increase, no, 0.3 percentage point increase in NCR, that's not statistically significant. So most likely it more or less was the same level for NCR. So yung mga may asterisk lang, that's statistically significant. Historically, you know, as you will see in this, no, and it follows the same trends as before. No? Historically, you will see highest poverty incidence, highest rates, no, in the Muslim Mindanao region, in Bicol, Region 5, and Eastern Visayas. And usually, poverty incidence rates are lowest in the metro area and then adjacent regions, which is Region 3 and Region 4A, Calabar Zone. Traditionally na yan. Because, you know, yun nga, one common complaint is growth and economic activities largely concentrated in Metro Manila and the surrounding areas. No? If you closely track, no, which we do, no, in the office, if you closely track the GDP share, no, of regions, no, almost 2/3 or roughly 2/3 of GDP is produced in these three regions alone. NCR, Central Luzon, and Calabar Zone. So you have Laguna, Bulacan, etc., etc. So the rest, you know, just make up 1/3 of economic output. So those are your regional trends, no? Especially, particularly, no, for the first half of 2021 as compared to the same period, diba? As economists, no, as emerging economists, you guys already know that you have to compare the same period, no, when you're comparing across time series, no, dapat same period. So it's the first semester 2021 compared to the first semester of 2018. So hopefully the second half is better, no? But I'm sure it probably would result in increases, no, rather than decreases. So we'll wait. No? They're probably finalizing the figures as we speak. Okay. Thresholds naman. No? So I always like to ask this question. So poverty line, no? Of course, every year, no, and every 3 years, especially, no, they update the poverty thresholds, no, to take into account increase in prices, inflation, etc., etc. So in 2021, no, at least for the first semester, the poverty line, no, meaning, no, if a person already earns, no, 2,416 pesos per month, no, that person is no longer considered poor, non-poor. No? If you multiply that by 5, no, kasi that's how they do it naman by family, no, they just multiply it, or 12,080 per month for a family of 5, or 72K, 72,500 sabihin na natin for the first 6 months. Food obviously is lower, no? It's only 1,679 per person per month, no? And remember, no, poverty threshold, that's basically less than 100 pesos a day. For food naman, that's roughly 50 plus something per person per day, or 1,679 per month, or 8,395 per month for a family of 5. And of course, that's the average, no, poverty line. Each region, no, because there are cost of living differences, each region would have a different poverty line or poverty level. So NCR, for example, you would expect to have a higher poverty threshold kasi mas mahal ang bilihin, no? Higher than Region 3. So it's 2,770, no, compared to this 2,704, no, and they're both higher than the national average. No? Usually, the poverty thresholds are much lower in Mindanao, for example, BARM, Region 5, Eastern Visayas, kasi the cost of living is much lower. Any comments on the poverty lines, no? On the poverty levels? Are these believable? Parang, are these enough to sustain you guys, to sustain a family? Any thoughts on these numbers? Any thoughts? Are these realistic, believable, hogwash, plucked out of thin air? Dieter, go ahead.
Sir, I don't. I feel like um from my perspective, having like 100 pesos a day, um it's I can't fathom it. Especially for families, not being able to just spend 100 pesos a day, especially if you have kids, and if you're married. I can't understand. Well, I can't imagine it, because how are you supposed to provide for them? Like, and for example, what would happen if if they get sick? It's I can't imagine it. It's a challenging, or it's a hard um picture to depict. So
Thanks, Peter. Someone just chatted me. Sir, I just wanted to ask, does this really take into consideration utility bills? I will cover a bit, no, but it's also on your canvas, how the thresholds are constructed. No? So it's supposed to, of course, the food or subsistence threshold only takes into account nutrition, so food lang. But the poverty line is supposed to be, no, in theory, supposed to cover food and other basic needs. So that includes utilities, presumably. So it's actually not necessarily less than 100 per family naman. It's less than 100 per person naman. Kasi this is per person per month. But still, no, I agree with Dieter. It's parang, especially for those of you who have gotten used to, at least, no, when there was school, no, some of you, I'm sure, no, or some of us, no, I don't like Starbucks. No? I buy my own beans, no, especially local beans. No? 100 pa lang, kulang na sa kape, di ba? I don't think you can buy a 100 peso Starbucks drink na these days. No? It's 110 na yata or something. Thank you for sharing, Dieter. No? Well, yes, we'll go to that later. No? It, that's usually, that's usually the common complaint of people. But are you guys crazy? No, these are so low. No? Well, the point here is, one, are they believable? You might have a hard time believing it, but we'll go into the actual methodology later. No? Pero there is some basis naman, in fairness. No? If you read the article by Dr. Jose Ramon Albert, no? I know him as Toots. No? He's one of the highly esteemed experts, no, in terms of poverty statistics. No? Together with Dr. Balisacan. There is basis naman, especially the food threshold. It's not saying that, oh, you're in good shape already, no? If you're earning this much. It's trying to estimate a very bare minimum. Does it mean it's great quality of life? No? It's just trying. Because at the end of the day, you need some sort of a metric, some yardstick, di ba? To measure. No? So it's trying to determine sort of the very core, very, very minimum for sustenance, food and non-food. So yun. It may be hard to believe, but there is basis. Yun nga, and later on we'll get to the actual basis of how do they actually compute it in general terms. I used to be part of the, sige, mamaya na lang when we discuss the poverty, how it's computed now, the methodology, the very technical methodology. Ito lang, just in the international domain, no, there's also what we call the international poverty lines. So most countries, they have their own national lines, no, they themselves do it, and there is like a UN or World Bank standard. No, it's either to measure extreme poverty, it's $1.90 a day per person, or $3.20 per day. Mind you, even though it's denoted as dollars, no, that's not it's US dollar, but it's in purchasing power parity. What do you call this? Level. No? So in short, no, you can read more, no, about, you can Google the technicalities of PPP, no, the purchasing power parity. I'll get to you. No, I see someone wrote something in the chat box. I'll get to you next. No, wait lang. So just to explain PPP in general, no, PPP is basically trying to ito na lang as an example. No? So $1.90, let's say $1.90. So it's not the 52, no, yung conversion natin. It's not the 50, 52 pesos to $1. It's not that. No? It's what the $1.90 or the 320 can buy in, let's say, the US. How much is that converted to here? So for example, if $1.90 can buy me, I can, if I have $1.90 in the States, kaya nga dollars pa rin, because the reference can still be the US. No? If I can buy, let's say, coffee, cup of coffee, no? $1.90, or no, wag na lang cup of coffee, Coke. I can buy 500 ml of Coke, $1.90. How much will that 500 ml Coke be equivalent here? No? So it's not 190 times 52, no? It's something like 50 pesos lang or less. So it's translated, no? I think the conversion, no, at least before, no, in the past few years, it's like around 20 pesos, no, per PPP dollar, no? 19.5 or so it's a $1.90 roughly translates to 37.4. The $3.20 translate to this. So it's this one. So the 320 is almost closer to the national rate. So the World Bank uses this. No? And the ADB, no, since $1.90 is the extreme poverty level, the threshold, mababa. No? So ADB computed our incidence in 2019 at 2.7. Let me read the chat box. No? Yep, sorry, sir. A classmate asked a question and I accidentally sent it to you. Okay, sorry. That's fine. That's fine. I didn't get any question anyway. Sige lang. All right, no worries. Might have deleted. I didn't even know that that function existed. So there are international poverty lines. Whenever you see the $1.90 or 320, that is not strictly US dollar. It is the PPP. No? It's converting. So what does $1.90 cost in the US? What can it get you? And if you translate that in the local setting, what will that cost? So parang ito, Coke. No? $1.90 can get you a 500 ml Coke. If you translate that here in the Philippines, it's 37.24, yung 500 ml of Coke. That's the easiest way to explain it by using examples. That's PPP for you. But if you want to geek out, there are articles showing you the technical details of deriving PPP. So yun lang, one tip, no, especially for your econ classes, no, when the UN and the World Bank publishes data on poverty, on even on GDP sometimes, it's PPP. It's the reference is the US as a country, but it's not the exchange rate. All right. Now, no, someone was asking, no, sir, kasama na ba lahat talaga? Are you really sure? Utility bills, schooling, health, etc. So I don't know if you were able to cover this, no? And I like the fact that you already have some basic working knowledge of poverty incidence. So I can go into more additional knowledge, no, or trivia for you guys. No? And it's good, no? At least when you're talking to someone, no, parang do you believe by the poverty threshold? It's so low. No? At least you can engage that person and say, yes, it may sound incredible, but there is basis for it. Mind you, no, I used to be, remember, no, after JVP, after TD, I tried working for the government. Kasi sabi ko at that time, no, I was a very messianic, no. So don't make the same mistake. No? I thought, no, if I join government, then I can create change from within. No? That's in reality you can, no, but it's hard. Easier said than done. So I joined government for a while, 5-6 years. Was called the National Anti-Poverty Commission, and I was our agency's member to an interagency committee, the Technical Committee on Poverty Statistics. No? Yung precursor agency of PSA, no, is the NSCB, the National Statistics Coordination Board, plus NSO and the Bureau of Agri-Stats. No? Minerge yun, all of them, is one giant agency called PSA. No? So I was a member of the Technical Committee on Poverty Stats. In general terms, they haven't. No? And there was a lot of debate going on, no, on the actual step or methodology. Should we include this? Should we do that? International. But mind you, no, globally, our methodology for measuring poverty at the national level, it's well regarded. It's sound according to international experts. So it gives me good. It should give you confidence that there is some basis naman. It's credible at the very least. So now, in general terms, no, how are the lines constructed? So as I told you, no, it comes from the FIES, no, the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, which is conducted every 3 years. So what happens in between? No? They conduct the APs, the APIS. No? We'll cover that next week, but it's in the second part of Module 2 in your Canvas course. The annual poverty indicator survey is done every year except when the FIES is done. Before, no, the APIS, the annual poverty indicator survey, was only concerned with non-income indicators, but starting, I think, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, no, they started including income. But the income questions are shorter than the ones in FIES. So you cannot derive official poverty figures from APIS and compare them to FIES. So enough of that trivia. So again, let's go back to poverty incidence. It's mainly from the FIES. So there are two components lang. In simple terms, two components of or think of it as a basket of goods. No? Two major components of the poverty line. There's the food and non-food, in simple terms. So the food is directly, the food requirements, no, the minimum food requirements, that's directly computed. It's directly estimated, no? The dietary needs. No, it was funny, no, especially when you're working government, you experience some of the funny technical interactions. So the NSCB at the time, they were really constructing, no, because we have the FNRI, no, the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, that sort of set the minimum dietary, the RDA yata, the dietary needs. In terms of protein, calories, and the vitamins and minerals. So this interagency group, we were developing menus. What would be the minimum menus for across regions, no? Across regions and different regions, and that would give you the minimum food requirement that FNRI, no, the scientific agency, would consider as the minimum needs of a person. So talagang they construct menus, no? I remember nga, may malunggay, may galunggong, may fish, etc. So it was a funny discussion, no? So it's direct. So the subsistence threshold is actually more, if you like to use the term believable, it's more believable. If you compare it to the non-food. So it's the direct estimation. You have menus that give you the minimum food requirement that's needed, no, for you to function well. Then, physically speaking. Then what about the other basket, no? Well, here it becomes indirect. Why? It's on a practical level kasi no one will ever agree to a standard menu of basic needs apart from food. Diba? Some people will say, basic need to. No, actually hindi. So it's very hard. No? It's very hard, number one, to agree on what is the minimum, what would the basket be composed of, the non-food ones. Second, the computation is also hard. What will be your reference range? So So it's indirectly measured. How is it indirectly measured? So what they do is, based on their data set, no, they examine the consumption patterns, no, of lower income population. If you don't get it now, no, and you're really interested in this, no, go back to Canvas or go back to this lecture. No, I'm recording it anyway. So what they do is they observe the consumption patterns of the lower income population. The lowest 30%. That's usually a rule of thumb. Some countries is the lowest 40%. So they just mimic it, no, as a share, as a ratio. So if food consumption is 2/3 of overall cost, ito example lang, no? Kasi you can naman the FIES survey, it really tries to disaggregate all the things that a family consumes or spends their money on. So they observe, no, for example, itong lower 30%, their food spending as a ratio or as a proportion of the total spending is 2/3. And the food threshold, for example, is 5,000. So it's mathematical. What will the poverty threshold be now? It's 7.5. Kasi 5,000 divided by X, no? What is the ratio, no, to give you 2/3? So kunyari 5,000 and 2/3 is your standard ratio, then it becomes 7.5. So that non-income at the non-food part is 2.5. Kasi 2/3 then 1/3 yung isa. And that now becomes the standard for the entire for the poverty line per region and on average in the country. So it's indirect. So theoretically speaking, kasama na yung utilities, kasama na yung internet is now a basic thing, no? Kasama na lahat ng basic needs. That's why people find it hard to believe kasi nga it's not directly computed. It's indirectly estimated based on the observation, the proportion of consumption pattern, food to non-food. Okay, just let me know if you have questions. So there's basis, credible naman. No? It's just sometimes it's hard to believe, especially Athenians, no? Because Athenians are, what is 100 pesos a day for, some of you will really have a hard time, even as a person. For food lang, no, yung iba sa atin. But they're not of course computing they're not computing people for people who eat outside every meal. No? So it's cooking, economies of scale, when the dad or the mom cooks for a family of 5, di ba, may economies of scale, etc. So yeah. So the food is directly estimated, the non-food, no, it's estimated na. Indirect siya as a ratio of food. All right. Ito, no, if you want to be more technical, mind you, there are this is named after 3 economists, no, statisticians, si Foster, Greer, and Thorbecke, no, FGT, no. And you can find this in the PSA press release as well. No? They have like highlights, and they measure this again every time they have the FIES. They come out with these statistics as well. These are the income gap, the poverty gap, and the squared poverty gap. I don't know if you were able to come across these measures, no, in your Dev Econ class. So we'll take it one by one. But mind you, to be honest with you, no, even when I was learning about all of these things before, no, when I was working in government, I didn't really find the last two, no, poverty gap and squared poverty gap, as useful. It was really the income gap that to me was very useful. So we'll take it one at a time. Hopefully you guys remember your statistical notations, no? Useful also for your econometrics, no? So first, no, so we'll discuss it one by one. No? Let's first discuss the income gap. I mean, sometimes it's funny, no? People get scared, no, or nasisindak with statistical notations. But if you actually distill this, no, explain it in layman's language, it's actually, ganun lang pala yun. So basically what this means is you compute for the average shortfall, no? So each poor person, no? Kaya nga it's I to ano yan? I to Q, no? I equals 1 to Q, no? The quantity of poor people. Let's say there are 20 million poor Filipinos, no? Each of them, no? You compute for their shortfall, no? Kunyari, my income is for in simple terms, so my income is 1,000 pesos per month. The poverty threshold is 2,000. So my shortfall, no? My income falls short by 1,000 pesos. Yun yung aking shortfall, no? So what they do is for each poor person, no, they compute for the difference between the actual income, the shortfall, no, and the poverty threshold, which gives you the shortfall, no, and they take the average for all. No? So on average, in the first semester of 2021, it was 27%. No? Basically, a 5-member family, no, if the poverty threshold was 12,000 pesos or so, no, their average shortfall was 27% of that. So they fell short by 3,000 pesos, roughly, no, per month. So yun nga, it's good for programming kasi you get a sense, no, this metric is actually useful because you get a sense of gaano pa kalayo, no, in general, yung poor from the poverty line. In general, on average. So ito, on average, the poor families or poor people are by almost a third, no? They're still far on average, no, far. Of course, it takes into account the sort of the outliers as well. So ito, 27% shortfall from the poverty line. So yun nga, for example, it would be good, let's say for the 4Ps, no, conditional cash transfers, maybe that will inform how much, let's say, you will give out, no, as cash transfers. So parang ganun, di ba? So it's a useful metric in my opinion kasi it's how far they are from the poverty line. Ito naman, poverty gap. Actually, it's a misnomer. It's sort of, the title is sort of weird. I didn't really want to use this, no? But I'm just teaching this, no? Because internationally, these measures are used, by the way, no? Not just in the Philippines. These are standard international measures as well. Ito, you replace the Q, no? Kasi Q is the number of families below the poverty threshold. No? Kasi when you need to get the average, no, in mathematical terms, no, you divide it by your target population. So ito, you get all the shortfall, and then you divide it, you add all the shortfall, and you divide it by the number of poor families. Ito hindi eh. Instead of the number of poor families, it's replaced by the number of families, not poor. Ito kasi poor. Number of families who are poor. Ito, number of families. So it's getting the average shortfall, not just of the poor families or poor people, the average shortfall of everyone. Kasi you're dividing it by the number of families, both poor and non-poor. So medyo weird, di ba? You add up all the shortfall, no? Eh syempre, pag non-poor ka, there's no shortfall, di ba? But then you divide it, you average it out by the number of families, the shortfall divided by the number of families. So for me, it's not, I think they're trying to just get a sense of the macro picture, no? Taking the entire population into account. How does the country fare in terms of falling short of the poverty line? So you would expect this to be much lower percent, no, than this one. So the country in general, combining both the poor and the non-poor, no, income shortfall, no, the country in general falls short by 5%. Sabi, i-round off na natin by 5%. There's a question. Sir, so what's the point of this? Wouldn't the overly rich families mess with the average? Hindi, yun nga eh. They want to see no whether I think it's useful lang no. It's useful to get a sense of the macro picture. Is the country in general falling short? And by how much? Kasi baka mamaya many people, and this speaks to inequality, no? Maybe the non-poor are really way above the poverty line. So they're pulling the nation's average up. It's actually not a shortfall, pero it's actually the average income of people is actually above. Diba? Hindi pala, diba? So that's the point, no? How far the entire country is from the poverty line. What degree of what's the degree of the shortfall? So yun nga, you're right, no? The problem is the overly rich family. And actually hindi naman, not necessarily kasi they don't measure they don't measure the shortfall of they don't measure, if you think about it, they don't measure naman the shortfall din of the non-poor families. So, yun, mas ano to eh. It's Q pa din naman eh. It's Q pa din. Yun nga, so you're right, no? Ako really, for me, no, really don't pay attention to this so much because I myself also doubt the usefulness, the utility of this one. It's really this one. The income gap that I would urge you guys to study, not the poverty gap. It's more useful from a programming sense. No? And all the more this one. No? Ito naman, that's why I encircled it. Sorry, it's a bit small. No? It squares the shortfall. Ini-square mo lang, basically, this one, no? the shortfall. No? They're saying that by doing that, no, kasi you're still dividing. This is poverty gap still, no? But before you divide it by the number of families, you square this. Or you square this. No? So, ang sinasabi is, by squaring it, you put more weight into the shortfall of the poor before you divide it. No? So it's supposed to represent how severe poverty is kasi ni-square mo. But again, for me, no, to be honest with you, I'm teaching you this, no, but I really don't see the utility of this, especially for developing programs and interventions. So it's not often used by most. No? Most countries use just the income gap and poverty gap. Not really this one. So it's supposed to represent the severity because they square the shortfall. Kumbaga they put more weight. Diba? It's multiplied by itself, diba? Obviously, so it's more weight. Diba? So yeah, so just remember, you may forget, no? But of course, I want to teach you lang, no? This is a technical course, no? Because you guys are econ majors. No? I don't teach this to the non-economics and non-meco students. No? Kayo kasi, you're supposed to like technical stuff. No? So there are things like poverty gap and squared poverty gap, but to me, really, I'm more of a development practitioner. No? I create interventions. No? I don't find the usefulness of poverty gap and severity. It's also called the severity, no? Poverty severity. This one, you focus. This one is very useful. So the average shortfall of the poor from the poverty threshold. It's divided by the number of poor, no? Not the total population. Okay. All right, let's switch gears now. No? So far, we've been talking about, sorry if this is information overload for you guys. I hope you're relishing some of the technical parts. No? Again, it's meant to provide a summary or augment what you're learning on Canvas. That's why I'm not getting into the weeds too much. No? Sometimes I am. Pero it's really on canvas that I expect you to digest it more. So this, I'm just providing a summary. Diba? As I promised, all our sessions will be from 1.5 to 2 hours lang. Usually less than an hour and a half. All right. Throughout this lecture, no, we've been talking about income. No? You have a certain income and you compare it with the threshold. Are you poor or not? It's earning income. Some are saying naman, no, monetary pa rin naman, no? You should rather choose consumption instead of income. But you're able, their expenditure approach. Yun nga, there's a huge debate, no? And this hasn't been settled. Some countries use the consumption or expenditure approach. Tayo, we use the income. No? We almost, no, some statisticians, no, they try to use the same data set and then try to compete for poverty incidence using the consumption-based approach. Dr. Arsenio Balisacan, no, is a big promoter of this one. But officially, no, we still measure by income. So, why, no? Why? The question is, and I'll just share it with you guys. No need to answer unless someone would want to explain it. The reason why some people are arguing for using consumption, what you spend on rather than what you earn, is the concept of consumption smoothing. Let me try to simplify this, but you have a link there to a Freakonomics article. Not here, no. This is the link to the graphic, no? But in Canvas, there's a Freakonomics article that provides a good illustration of what this means. It sounds fancy, it sounds technical, but it's a very simple concept. Your parents, no? Most of your parents are probably employees, no? Most of your parents are just employees, no? So their income is kind of constant, no? Throughout the year, 15, 30, or every week or every month, no? So their incomes are pretty stable. But that's not true for everyone, no? Incomes can be seasonal. Let's say farmers, no? When there's harvest, your income is great. When there's no harvest, you're waiting, your incomes are mababa lang. So it's uneven, no? But what they're saying is consumption or expenditure, what you spend on, it's a good predictor because it's fairly constant. It's smooth, kaya nga consumption smoothing. Your consumption is pretty much constant. It doesn't ebb and flow. Unlike income, can be very erratic. So yun yung nila. So ito for example, no, simple graphic, no. So for example, a farmer na lang to make it easier, no. There's no harvest now, no? So I will borrow money from neighbors or the bank if I can, no. So sige, utang muna, and then harvest happens, no. I now have money. So I can pay back this one, and I have savings, and then after the harvest is done, we've used up the money. It's time to borrow again, etc. So income ebbs and flows, but consumption, that's why it's it's pretty constant. No, I need to buy rice and ulam for my family or chicken, whatever. I need to buy eggs. I need to pay for my son's transportation, etc. So consumption is fairly constant. So I myself, if we can switch, I would argue, I would be partial to converting to consumption because it's a more stable. Kasi kunyari, minalas yung person, you ask that person about this income, for this period of time, and nakalimutan lang, or that for that period, that person hasn't earned income yet, next month pa, then you might put him in the poor classification, hindi pala. So yeah, those kinds of technicalities. But consumption, fairly constant. It's fairly constant. You would expect, and sabi nga nila, recall, kasi it's a survey, sometimes you don't know, especially if you're not earning constant salary, no? Pwede marami kang racket. No? Sometimes it's hard for you to compute your income, but you can easily recall your day-to-day spending. So it's in terms of survey bias, no, or survey recall, some people are arguing it's also easier for people to recall what they spent on or their expenditure. All right. Ito, very easy, no? You've seen this, no? These are old graphs, no? There are recent ones, no? But I don't like to use the recent ones because of the pandemic, these were probably over stated, no? Or worse, no? Got worse. No? So there's this thing called self-rated poverty, no? Parang 40+%, etc., etc. No? You see this in the news all the time because it's very alarming, no? And it's usually higher, much higher. Most of the time double, roughly, no? Of official poverty statistics. It's different, no? They're not comparable because ito naman, whereas the official poverty, and not to I'm not saying this is useless. No, it actually, I'll get to that point later. Self-rated poverty, it's not as rigorous. No, the measurement is not as rigorous as, let's say, the official poverty statistics, where they have menus, then you observe the consumption pattern, do a ratio, etc. Mas rigorous yun. This one, it's basically yes or no. Are you poor or not? It's based on a person's perception. So even the problem with this, no, the downside of this is, yes, it's quick. It's just a question. The downside to this is the person who not a rich person, even no, a person who's not poor, no, might consider himself poor because relative to, let's say, his neighbors, he feels poor. I only have one car. My neighbor has 3-4 cars on average. Poor ako. So this may take into account relative poverty. So it's kaya nga it's usually higher, no? Kasi it takes into account your ability to compare, even though you're not really technically poor. What is the usefulness then? No? It's useful because to me, no, and to most economists, no, it gives you a good sense of the pulse of the people at a particular time. This is done every quarter. No? So usually when there's crisis, there's pandemic, etc., you'd expect this to be higher. No? When GDP is growing, there are no national crisis or big ones like Typhoon Odette or Yolanda, no? You'd expect this to be a bit lower. So it's good for pulse checking. That's one of its benefits as well. Yeah. And for government, no, it's good to see, whether the perception of people are, their lives are improving or not. So just to compare this with, it's not totally useless, but remember, self-rated poverty data, they're not constructed or measured as rigorously as the official ones. Oops, I was supposed to ask you guys about that, but anyway, I got carried away. So again, it's higher than official figures, no computations. It's good for pulse checking. Okay, a twin concept or measure of poverty is inequality. You've probably come across this one also in your Dev Econ class. The Gini coefficient. Sino ba si Gini? It's some Italian guy. So you don't have to bother really with this with the way it's constructed, but just remember, it's derived from this Lorentz curve, no? It's basically a metric from 0 to 1. No? 0 is so puro decimal points. So 0 is perfectly equal. Everyone has the same income. Whereas 1 is most unequal. No? One person or one family controls, let's say, 99%. So those are the extremes, no? Exaggerated. tayo, we've usually, our measures have usually been at the 0.4 something level, 0.4, between 0.40 to 0.45 usually. Since before, no? We are, no? We are the most unequal country in terms of income in Southeast Asia. And I think top 2 or 3 in Asia. India is another big one that's highly unequal, and Indonesia as well. So that's inequality for you. It's how the wealth is distributed. Now, I want you to just think, no, even if you haven't covered this on Canvas, no, what do you think, no? What's the relationship between the 3 things, no, that we've been talking about? No? Poverty, inequality, and economic growth. How does these 3 different variables, factors, or phenomena affect each other? Or do they? Anyone? Just some ideas there. Any ideas? What's the interrelationship between among these 3 things? Any brave soul? Walang brave soul, or you are multitasking? Perhaps. Even just one brave soul. So what's the relationship? What are the interrelationships? Sige. Wala. No brave soul. All right. That's fine. But please, no, I'll provide the summary, but there's a video on Canvas by Dr. Raballon. And Dr. Raballon is one of the world's experts in terms of poverty as well, poverty statistics. By the way, he's okay with our methodology for measuring poverty. Martin Raballon. So, 2 things, no? So let's explore. There's 2 directions, no? Let's explore 2 directions, no? The first is, what is the effect on economic growth, the macro picture, on poverty? Or is there a relationship? No? So what? No, parang so what? When a country grows the pie, the economy is growing, there's more economic activity, is that good or bad for poverty? In general, it is good. Angela Favis said, even with evident economic growth, if our country is still unequal, the people who are below the poverty line will still have a hard time feeling this growth. It's not just feeling, but actually experiencing or being part of that growth. You are absolutely correct. No? What they found out, and this is based on data, no, global data, no, and they've done this for individual countries as well. Growth in general is good for poverty. The more rapid the growth is, the more poverty can be reduced. But what they found out was the more equal, or the flip side na natin, the more unequal society is, aka the higher the Gini coefficient, just like the Philippines, the elasticity, diba? The responsiveness of poverty reduction to economic growth becomes more muted, mas mabagal. The effect of rapid economic growth, if a country is unequal, is more muted than countries who are growing and their income distribution is much more it's better, it's more equal. So that's the first part. Economic growth is good for poverty reduction, but it's even better if the income distribution is more equal. Well, medyo in theory naman, it makes sense, diba? Kasi income inequality is just all about income distribution. No? So the poorer ones are able to get a bigger slice of the pie if it's more equally distributed. So if it's highly unequal, no, even if the pie gets bigger, it doesn't mean additional benefits accrue to the poor. The rich can keep getting richer with crumbs going to the poor. No? As I keep mentioning, no, economic growth is a sufficient and an important consideration for development, but it is not the only factor. Now, on the flip side naman, no? Kasi we've sort of analyzed how does economic growth, what is the elasticity of poverty reduction to economic growth. Balik na rin naman natin. So, the other direction. How does poverty levels amidst equality, inequality or equality, how does poverty reduction affect naman economic growth? The other side, baliktad, in reverse. Here, on the flip side, no, yun nga, the more unequal society is, the harder it is for upward mobility. No? The harder it is for the poor to get more income, no? To earn more income and provide greater benefits. So the problem is they remain poor. If you're poorer, the less you can become productive because less educational attainment, etc., etc. It can also have negative impacts on economic growth. Diba? If the poor are not able to study more, be well nourished, so that they can be more productive, then productivity is more muted, therefore economic growth is not as rapid as can be. Compared if, let's say, the society is more equal. So the question is, how do you make society more equal? Anyone? If inequality is very important to both poverty and economic growth in both directions, how can you make society more equal? Any thoughts here? Any thoughts? Wala. Sige, okay lang. No worries. But please keep reviewing on Canvas. No? You equalize, go ahead. Give more economics and social opportunity to those deprived. Yeah. So the communists will always, it might sound romantic. No? Now let's equalize assets and incomes. No, no, no. To make society more equal, of course, easier said than done. No? You equalize opportunities, not necessarily the end income. No, there was a landmark journal before, no, called "Growth is Good for the Poor," and yun na, that's our first point. No, the economic growth is good for poverty reduction. But then there was a rejoinder, no, by Oxfam, I think even, no? Growth with equity or growth with education is good for the poor. So they're saying in there, it's not just growth per se, no, but it's the quality of poverty reduction will depend on how equal your society is. And the only way really is to equalize opportunities, access to education, access to health, access to things. No? And we will discuss the capabilities approach next week. No? Access to things that will help you, will empower you to chart your own destiny and earn more income in the future. Focusing, no, there's another chat message here. No? Kayo yata guys, you're nahihiya ba kayo to basically tell everyone? Puro direct message lang ta. There's one person saying focusing on education. Don't be embarrassed. No? I mean, some of these concepts might be new to most of you. So okay lang yan. We're all learning together. One person said, focusing on education also helps, exactly, on equalizing opportunities. Kaya nga, yeah, that's, and human capital is part of it, if you've come across that term. So we'll explore this more, no, when we talk about the capabilities approach. All right, the last section of tonight. No? So sorry if it's a lot of info overload, no, for you guys. So the last thing, no, because of the pandemic, no, this is very relevant, no, especially during the pandemic. Vulnerability. No. This is another concept that was sort of created by or popularized by Dr. Celia Reyes, no? Of PIDS. No? For her, vulnerability is the degree to which a person is at risk, no? Or a family is at risk of falling into poverty, no? If some certain things happen. So pandemic. No? So she distinguishes between two types of poverty. One is chronic poverty. So these are people who are, in general, always poor, no, having a hard time falling out, no? Or going meeting or going beyond the poverty line. Versus transient, no, these are people, mostly people who probably have incomes near, no, the poverty line, no, where they can slide back to poverty anytime, fall in and out of poverty, no, periodically, especially if there are shocks, no, like pandemic, uh, calamities, no, yung mga typhoons, no, especially in the rural side. So either they're poor most of the time, and sometimes they're able to move out, no, or non-poor most of the time, pero sometimes because of shocks. We call external things shocks, no, in economic parlance. And as you've probably surmised, no, many of those living, they were saying like 100%, if your incomes are 100% only of the poverty line, you're vulnerable. Kasi konting rainy day lang, so to speak, then you can slide back into poverty. And many near poor are vulnerable. That's why you saw that almost roughly 3 million Filipino families fell into poverty during the pandemic. Yun. A huge chunk, I would say, no, were previously near poor, no? Because they were vulnerable. No? Sakto lang yung income nila. Not enough for a rainy day. So based on Dr. Celia's analysis, no, there are certain indicators. No? These are old studies. Sayang nga eh. Kasi she hasn't done any new publication on this concept previously. So the data is only as recent, 2009 lang. That's it. No new data. No? But it's still important, no, as a concept. No? Parang, are you targeting chronic poverty, or you're helping people not to slide into poverty? So there were some determinants, no, or factors that would increase the risk of people to be vulnerable to poverty. So one is you live in the rural areas, kasi nga agriculture is very risky. No? Sometimes you're at the mercy of climate, the weather. Those living in insecure areas like barn or arm, no? And basic sectors. No? Basic sectors, that's a term used for marginalized sectors, no? Like farmers, fisher folk. There's a law, no? Republic Act 8425. There's a law that basically lists down, no, the 12 basic sectors. You can look it up yourself. No? So farmers, fisher folk, migrant workers, senior citizens, etc., etc. Indigenous peoples. The important thing really, in terms of addressing vulnerability, is a safety net. No? Insurance schemes, mga SSS, etc., etc. So to support people that when something happens, no, their savings, no, or their money is largely left untouched. No, they have additional support. So that's really the important thing. And Dr. Celia Reyes also enumerates the different high-level interventions that would reduce both chronic and transient poverty in the long run. So education, as some of you have already mentioned, no? Lower dependency burden. No? So for example, the more children obviously that you have, the more money that you need to spend, or the more elderly you have. So yun din. No? So you lower that. No? And we'll cover reproductive health in module 4. Asset ownership, though, the more savings you have, and even assets like physical things, so that you can sell, no? When there's a rainy day, that's good as well. No? Employment, obviously, if you have a steady stream of income, then much better. And finally, absence of armed conflict, especially in Mindanao. So vulnerability, I provided some articles and links to papers. Some of these are optional, but study in your own time. This is a very interesting concept and really important, no? Kasi sometimes, again, when you try to design interventions, it has to be appropriate to the problem. Ito, ibang problem ng chronic, iba rin ang problem ng transient. And we're done. So I promise you an hour and a half, and we're done. So next week, we'll cover the non-income part or the non-monetary metrics of poverty and well-being. Any questions? No questions? All right. So if you have questions, you can email me. You can consult with me. Just let me know. Okay. Going, gone. So thank you guys for joining me again. Sorry if it's too much information, and I hope at least you found it interesting. Keep studying on Canvas. No, I'll try to upload Module 3 in the next 2 weeks. So next week, we'll cover the non-income part. Okay? I'll see you guys next week. Maraming salamat. Have a good dinner. Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
sir.